What's going on, guys? Welcome back here with Casey Steinman. Going to talk some NASCAR Daily Fantasy, taking a look at our first repeat race, believe it or not, the Pocono Raceway 43rd Annual Pennsylvania 400. When I think about Pocono, probably one of the tracks I've been to the most in my life. It is a tough track to set up a car for. You have to compromise at one of the three turns, and it also is known to have some of the craziest restarts that you'll ever see in all of racing, but also a track where the pit crew really does matter. You're talking about going over 200 miles an hour down into turn one, which means any time you lose in the pits is going to be time you lose on the racetrack very quickly. Casey, what do you see about this race?
Well, when we talk about trends, sadly, my trends this week are going to start with the weather. The June race was rained out on Sunday. They finally ran the race on Monday. I think that it looks like it's going to be the same scenario this week. I think there's going to be a lot of rain Sunday. I don't know that they'll be able to get it in. I think the forecast is terrible, and I doubt we'll see any racing Sunday afternoon. So as far as the race goes, when it goes green, my trends to watch this year are going to be the continued domination of the JGR cars, including the alliance with the Denver-based 78 Furniture Road team of Martin Truex Jr. After the second leg of qualifying yesterday, they held the top four spots. And the next trend I think that's important is a 15-race winless streak of the Hendricks cars. And it looks like that'll probably stretch to 16 after this weekend.
As far as drivers I like in this race, maybe not really the mid-tier guys, but I'm telling you, I'm looking at the back. You just mentioned the Hendrick drivers. I'm looking at Jimmy Johnson 21st, Casey Kane 23rd, Jeff Gordon 24th. If you're talking about points, okay, I get it, bad qualifying efforts, but I don't see them getting beat by guys like Casey Mears, Ryan Blaney, A.J. Allmendinger, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Austin Dillon. Some of those drivers are going to come back. And I think if you're looking at pure points, those are going to be three drivers that I'm kind of looking at. Maybe not so much Casey Mears, but definitely Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon knows how to get around Pocono. He's been here a million times. I think at this point he's a little bit more comfortable in the car. Those are some drivers that I'm looking at early on to get me some solid points in this race.
Well, I think you make a good point. And when you talk about that 88 car, it's important to remember that Dale Jr. finished second in this race in June. So Jeff Gordon might be one of those guys. But my top three drivers this week, I'm going to start with the aforementioned 78 team, Martin Truex Jr. You know, last week we talked about not picking a pole sitter, being uncomfortable with picking a pole sitter, but I think both you and I both were willing to make that exception last week for Kyle Busch. We said he'd get out front and run away with it. That's exactly what he did. So this week I'm going to make the same exception. I think Martin gets out front and he runs away with it. He said after qualifying that this car was super fast, and I expect we'll see a race like we saw in Indy last week where Kyle Busch got out front and ran away with it. Next, I'm going to go with the team that was scrambling with their setup. As the qualifying clock was running down in the first run, that was Kyle Busch. He kind of falls into that category of drivers that didn't qualify very well. But I think we might see some potential for a lot of fantasy points there. He didn't make it out of round two, but he's got a super fast car again, another super fast Joe Gibbs Toyota, not surprising. So I think we'll see him go from 16th inside the top five in real short order. Driver number 3 this week in this category is going to be Kevin Harvick. You know, Harvick had a terrible qualifying effort yesterday, but he ran super fast in practice today. I think they've made the adjustments that they need to make, so I think there's an opportunity for a lot of points there as well.
With my mid-tier guys, I'm going to stick pretty high up in the qualifying order. I like what I've seen out of Chase Elliott. He seems to be the most stable of all the Hendrick cars. He's ran very well here. He's won ARCA race here. Austin Dillon seems to be the most consistent RCR car. I know that Menard and I know that Newman qualified well. I'm certainly going to talk about them later on, but I like Dillon as well. And I also think Kyle Larson showed a lot of maturity, and another driver that's won in the ARCA series here showed a lot of maturity, and he has really tapered himself off with wrecking race cars. I think that it's a little high up for them, but I think they're going to prove to be stable up there, and I think they're going to run most of the race in around the top 15.
Well, I think you're right, and this is an important point to make here. I think this is where you make your living in NASCAR fantasy leagues with these mid-tier drivers. I think it's more important than picking a race winner, actually. So this week I'm starting with the car and the team that admitted they got caught sleeping during the first round of qualifying. when crew chief Brian Patty called the 16 of Greg Biffle off the track and back onto pit road. They thought they were safe. Then some cloud cover came in. A few teams went back out on the track with under a minute to go. I think it was 90 seconds left on the clock. And the 16 got bumped from the top 24. So I think they were embarrassed, and they should be embarrassed. But Greg said afterwards he had a super fast car, a top 10 car, in fact. So he said when the green drops, they're going to be coming, and I'm buying what they're selling this week. I'm going to be heavy on the 16 as he rolls off in the 25th spot. So next, I'm going to go with your bromance, the 27 of Paul Menard. I know that's your guy, and you mentioned him before. This guy's been super fast all week, fast in practice, great qualifying effort. And they brought in a new crew chief this week, and they've been fast since they unloaded that car. So he was fastest in one of the practice sessions on Friday, I believe it was. So, he rolls off in that third spot. He's going to be right behind Martin Truex Jr. Probably not a bad spot to be in on Sunday. And for my third driver to watch in this group here, I'm gonna go with the guy that finished fourth here last year. You talked about him a little bit earlier, and that's the 24 Chase Elliott. Probably the best of the Hendrick cars this weekend. He had a strong finish here last month, a couple of the great qualifying run yesterday. So he gives me the confidence that he's going to have another top 10 finish tomorrow or Monday or whenever they decide to get this race in.
In terms of guys that I want to stay away from, it's funny because some of these did bite me last week, and Paul Menard was one of them. It's hard for me to go with Paul Menard in third place. Any other time, I'd be all for Paul. He's my buddy. I've got to meet Paul a whole bunch of times, but it's just a little high. It's a little bit of a risk, and I see him giving up ground to people relatively quickly, like Denny Hamlin, like Tony Stewart, like Brad Keselowski. The other driver, I really don't know what to make of RCR right now. I mean, they're qualifying well, but they're not being all that consistent in race trim, and when they go back through the field, they can't get back up there. Second one is right almost behind him in Ryan Newman. It's tough for me to think that Ryan Newman is going to be able to stay up there the entire time. It just doesn't seem like a realistic proposition. He hasn't ran fifth at any point, I think, this year consistently. And then when we go back to the other driver, this is somebody that you got concerned that I picked against last week. It's A.J. Allmendinger. A.J. Allmendinger, 13th place. This is a good track for him, but this car has constantly had mechanical issues. And this is a track that's really, really hard on equipment when you talk about high-end, top speed, parts moving faster than they ever will. Obviously, this is also a track where we talk about some downshifting that used to take effect, and I just don't think this 47 team puts quality race cars on the track that are built to go the distance. And some of the issues I've heard that they have are more of parts failures from distributors that maybe they can't just go out and purchase better parts from. So I don't know if there's not a mix of, not the greatest race cars with not the best parts, and certainly that's not going to affect you in qualifying and practice, but come race time it does, and I just don't have a lot of trust in this 47 car making a full race.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I don't have Allmendinger on this list, but I could easily put him there. I'm going to go in a little bit different direction and kind of back to where you started to close this out. I think there's a lot of value from a points perspective in the drivers that they're going to be starting between the 13th and about 24th position. So I'll give you three of those that I like, and the rest of those, the rest of those guys could be players by the end of the race. So first, I'm going to start with the guy you mentioned earlier, Casey Mears. You said you're kind of on him, maybe off of him. They've had a good week, but they just don't have the power to stay there. They're kind of hit and miss. And I just don't think that team has what they need to be competitive. Maybe they have some of the same problems that 47 has. I don't know, but they're up and down, back and forth. I just don't have any confidence in them. And the next guy that I want to put on this list again this week is Chris Buescher. These guys qualify decent, but they just can't make the power they need to stay there. So I'm going to put him on this list once again this week. He's kind of my perennial guys that I don't like. So my last driver that I'm going to avoid this week is one of the Hendricks cars, the 5 of Casey Kane. He finished well here back in June, but the Hendricks Motorsports struggles are well documented the last 15 races. But I still think this 5 team, they're just out to lunch, man. They're not with the rest of the team. I think they're bringing up the rear. They tear up a lot of equipment, and I'm just going to stay away from them this week again.
All right, and lastly, man, I did not do this last week, but we really appreciate everybody that comes and helps grows our channel. So we did get some other subscribers over the past month. I want to give you guys a quick shout out. Just Devin, DITUNDDOD, and Kevin Ferguson, all new subscribers. We appreciate your support. Anybody that does subscribe, man, we'll make sure that we give you a shout out on the video. Appreciate you checking this one out, and we'll be back next week with more Daily Fantasy NASCAR.